All right, folks, welcome back to the Brothers Grimley. I'm Ricky,
I'm Rob.
and we will be your host as we discuss building, battling, and exploring the setting of the grim darkness of the far future. All right, Rob. With intros out of the way, let's talk about some of the news, and we're going to be pretty brief today, just to be able to focus on the main topic at hand. So, as a reminder, we are part of the Gamers of the Eastern Fringe Network. That's a wargaming group located in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. And the main thing we want to cover is that GEF will be putting on its first GT in the area um, in early 2023. It'll be having the Winter Ruin GT, and that'll be the weekend of February 25th through 26th, a 2-day event, and it'll be at Nova, the Northern Valley EMS in Copley, PA. Tickets are live. You can find that on Eventbrite, and you'll be able to get tickets. We do have some early bird discounts still going on through January the 8th. There's also our premium package, which we call the Steel Bird, that will include not only standard admission, but also a t-shirt, dice, and objective markers. So if that's of interest to you, go get it. Um, there is a limited number of those Steel Bird tickets, so you definitely want to get those if you are interested in any of those extra swag to be included on top of just admission to a great event. So check out full information about that on our events page, either on Facebook or Discord. You can find that event, and we will link all of that in the video description. All right, brother. So let's talk about this. Our main topics tonight, folks, are mainly going to be about some of the kind of the what ifs as we look down to what's coming in early 2023. As many of you know, if you're following the articles coming out on Warhammer Community, as well as just being spoken about in your local groups, you know that right now it is the great holding pattern, is it not, brother?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot of big changes coming up, especially with the previews that we have been seeing. It's going to make things incredibly interesting coming into the new year, and especially with 10th of Arks of Omen and what all that means and what it's actually going to bring to the game.
100%, 100%. So yeah, when we say a giant holding pattern, what we're really talking about is unless you are a super competitive player trying to squeeze out any last possible ITC points for the season, this is really a time where many of us are kind of hearing the rumors of what's coming in the next season, the next grand tournament mission pack, and getting ready for that. I know between my brother and I here, we've been talking mainly about, the previewed Arks of Omen, book that they've been talking about. And so we're going to briefly look at that together because in that article, in addition to talking about the setting itself, it is also showing a good bit about what's coming down the pike in the way of a new detachment, which is breathing a huge breath of fresh air into our hobby. So let's take a look at that. All right, so the detachment is named after the actual book itself and season, Arks of Omen. Um, Automatically, what you'll see at the top, folks, is unlike the current system, which has different CP cost per detachment, and then based upon if your warlord is in said detachment, you might get a bit of a refund, and it goes back down to 0. In this one, the CP cost is 0 innately, and what you'll see, of course, is some red and then some grayscale boxes. So the red boxes are required spots. So what is required for this detachment is a single HQ, which would serve as your warlord, and then 3 of any of the things listed: 3 troops, or elites, or fast attack, or heavy support, or lords of war. Go figure. So tons of flexibility. This is basically a super version of a battalion, spearhead, vanguard, outrider detachment, or even super heavy detachment in one single thing. I mean, that all you have to do is bring 3 of something, and then you're ready to go. So if your army is fantastic in its troop spot, bring troops. If yours is better in heavy support, you want to bring the big guns, bring them. If you're crazy and want to bring 3 stompas, I can't imagine you'll have much else left, but go for it. So this is great. Now, after these required spots, it opens up the remainder of the detachment. So some optional things that you can then fill out your force in, including flyers, fortifications, other HQs, a spot specifically for character-based elites, separate from the standard elites, additional fast attack heavy support, Lords of War, and 9 more potential troop spots for a grand total of 12. So, hey Rob, over there, what do you make of this thing?
Well, personally, I kind of like the idea of there being a separate categories for the elite characters. I think this is really going to help out a lot of factions that are very focused on their auras, their characters, Space Marines, very especially, I think is going to greatly benefit from this, detachment in particular. Um, and again, I think it's going to be very chaotic for a lot of people to get used to this kind of detachment while also being fun at the same time because it just freely allows you to bring kind of whatever you really want. It doesn't restrict you on trying to bring 2 detachments just in order to get, a certain number of fast attacks or heavy supports. You don't have to worry about that anymore. So we've all have struggled with, trying to bring a spearhead, but then you may have wanted just that one more in the elites or the fast, or just whatever you really wanted, but you just needed to bring that patrol detachment with throws off the entire list. With this, though, you're able to really just have that one, really bring whatever it is you really need and want for the battle. So I think this is going to be really easy for some, maybe a little bit harder for some, that because with that restriction, it did make armies a little bit predictable with their outcome, but now this is going to be just kind of a lot of things coming at you. A lot of different model combinations are going to come out from this, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure you saw it as well, but a lot of folks online, of course, are talking this is that SKU list are back in season, and because of the flexibility afforded to you in this detachment alone. And man, I'm excited because it has so much in one detachment. I mean, before, if you and I wanted to bring a collection of stuff, we would bring a battalion to give us the flexibility we see here, but you didn't get Lords of War in that detachment alone. You didn't get fortifications in that same detachment. You had to bring separate detachments for heavy for Lords of War, a super heavy or a super heavy auxiliary. You had to bring a fortifications detachment just to unlock those things. This, it's all in one. So if you wanted to bring, Rob, I'm thinking of your Tau, if you wanted to bring any of your Tau fortifications, you could do that. If you wanted to bring a storm and a fortifications, you could do that in one thing and still have all your CP to spend on relics, pre-game strats, warlord traits, you name it, or the aforementioned other thing we see down here, which is going to be a brand new ability for bringing more than one of those things that say you can only bring one. Specifically in the image, it shows Tau. And of course, if you've ever played or field Tau yourself, you know that you can only bring one commander unless you play Farsight Enclave. But here you have the ability to break that rule by paying 1 CP before the game. Now, this can only be spammed once. You can't just pay this indefinitely and just bring a list of all commanders, as much as I know your Tau heart would love that, right, brother?
Oh, yes, and the same goes for the My Grey Knights, which it then stems the argument of can we bring more than one Grand Master per Brotherhood? Now, this is kind of a leak, but it is written in the rules that state in the Codex that we can only bring one. But with this hint showing Tau, we kind of think that it entails that we go kind of against our Codex right now, that we are allowed to bring it in other ones where before it was just Farsight only. But again, as it states, Farsight can't bring 3. Unfortunately, that doesn't look like it's going to be a possibility anytime soon. But again, we're gotta wait for the official ruling and when it comes out. But since they're definitely using that image, it does make me think that those written rules in the Codex are going to have an FAQ stating that if you use this, then you can bring it in. Versus where if you're not using the stratagem, then you just stick to your one. But it is definitely going to make things, a lot of things, good, especially for commander hunting.
Hmm.
If you love those assassination ones, and especially since there is going to be another, um, slot for characters, and a lot of people are going to bring those characters out. If they keep that assassination secondary, which I don't think they're going to take out anytime soon,
I don't
there's going to be a
either.
lot of characters on the field, and that's what I'm thinking is going to happen.
No, I'm completely with you. And friends, if you did see a cat walk by, that's just one of our household cats. He likes to come by and join me anytime we're doing recordings or virtual meetings. So you'll see him from time to time. But yes, to Rob's point, of course, you see specifically in the strategy it calls out when a unit can only be included once, meaning that, of course, in Farsight's case, it specifically alludes to being able to bring two. So these two wouldn't mesh, at least by initial rules writing right now. We'll see. But again, plenty of stuff to consider and still work through from the article, and you're welcome to check it out yourself up on Warhammer Community. We still got a bit more to talk about because you know, in terms of the two of us thinking about how that's going to change the landscape of 40K and list rating specifically. One of the things I heard, and Rob, I'll be curious to get your thoughts on this as well. There's been a lot of doom and gloom in the initial response to this detachment about troops becoming obsolete. So I got my own thoughts prepared, but what do you think, brother?
I mean, I feel like things might go a little bit back to eighth, just a little bit, where because there's the rumor that Space Marines can get the sticky rule back, where they can claim an objective, move off of it, and then still have it as their own. So we might see a lot of very aggressive movements, and especially if the World Eaters get a hold of that rule as well. So that's definitely going to be something where we just see very aggressive pushes from troops. But yes, with detachments like this, it begs the reason that there is going to be a lot of very heavy
Hmm.
support units being brought out, or very heavy elite categories. There's so much for a lot of armies to use from this, to where it can, again, the game can once again become more of a kill list, and but a lot of rules and auras being affected at the same time. So
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, like you said, now we're getting a little ahead of ourselves because now we're talking about one of the potential leaks that has been put out there into the community about what changes are coming down the pike in this latest season and balanced data slate for Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines accordingly. But um, my initial thoughts, much like my brother here, I'm not as doom and gloom about troops being gone, obsolete, or no longer taken just because they're not required as per the current detachment system. Actually, I'm thinking, to an example I have coming up in this early part of the new year. I'm playing in a local escalation league, and I'm fielding Chaos Knights, and I'm feeling really good about bringing some objective secured bodies that are also very fighting. Now, mind you, not everybody's objective secured bodies are T7 models with 12 wounds that fight and shoot, and potentially can even do psychic if you give them the right blessing of the dark gods. So certainly doesn't mean that I don't. I still think troops will be a thing because there is power in being able to swing an objective by simply towing in one guy onto an objective versus an entirely elite fast attack or heavy support choice that's sitting on the same objective. So I do think it's going to give us a lot of interesting play, and you might see some lists, like Rob said, that are totally kill based, that are there to as the old term goes, just leaf blower another army off the board, and it doesn't care about having objectives secured because if it doesn't kill you, it's not worried about exchanging unique rules. So we'll see, but I do think troops are going to have a play, and depending upon the general and player who fields their army, troops could still be a important Swiss Army knife application if you do it right. The other big thing from the article was, of course, alluded to. We glanced over it in the screen share, but it mentioned about allies being brought back. Now, this was done away with editions ago, and while souping was still a thing that could be done, even just recently, you could still bring certain allied factions together, like Tyranids and Gene Stealers, or Chaos Marines and Demons, or Chaos Knights and Demons. What we're seeing now is a very specific way things can be allied, and a lot going on there. So, Rob, as an aspiring Votann player, how do you feel about being allied with most Imperium factions and possibly even the Tau?
I think it's going to make a lot of fun matches. I can't see, there might be one combo, one sort of list out there that breaks the mold and makes its way up to a top ranking in a GT just through odd coincidence. But I definitely can see it being a lot of fun. Just mixing and matching some of your armies, and just, if you wanted to go have a casual game but didn't know which army to bring, why not both? I mean, it could make things a lot more fun. I mean, when I got the Grey Knights, I really kind of liked the idea of maybe bringing one of the larger Imperial Knights to have that firepower, since Grey Knight's arsenal is very light on weapons. Not melee, just guns. So
agreed. Yeah, you would definitely bring more of oh goodness, a Crusader with the double ranged option versus a ranged and melee option. Yeah.
Yes, it will fill that gap of having some firepower when the only firepower I really had came from Dreadnoughts, Land Raiders, or Razorback.
Or which we all know are clearly the most meta choices you can bring in the current meta is bringing Razorbacks and Land Raiders and standard classic Dreadnoughts.
Yes, but yes, the allies does make it a little bit interesting to see what we're gonna see coming forth with a lot of different army combinations. I kind of like the idea of mixing armies up. Now, again, I like the idea, but I could also see it being one very long match. Just flipping through 2 pages, trying to figure out which does what, who does what. If you have the time, by all means, I would say yes. If you and your buddy want to go at it with 4 different armies on the same table while being one match, go for it. But
yeah,
it's going to make things a lot chaotic.
And again, depending upon if that's your thing, go for it. Feel like the chaotic matches, if that scratches the itch, by all means. But specifically with the possibility of Votann being, well, it says in this article they will be available to be allied, but the possibility of them being allies even with the Tau, since in the lore they've done a lot of trading and stuff with them. I could really see that being powerful because, of course, what Tau often lack is a bit of melee punch. And if Votann can be allied, I wouldn't think your first pick would be bringing in a more ranged, supremacy, but really to bring in some of the berserkers and others that are really fantastic in fighting in melee and being a good kind of counter melee option that you could stick right in the middle of the board, and then just hope somebody's melee threat connects with them before they connect with things like your hammerheads or other, your broadsides and other things that want to be more stationary and just keep firing down range. But we'll see. Like Rob said, we will find out when this gets fleshed out in earnest. There's even a bit in the article talking about interactions with like Gene Stealer cults and how Brood Brothers and other things are related to that. So we will see when it happens, and we get the full book in our hands. We'll happily bring you some commentary on that. Which brings us to our next big point, because of course we got a ton of stuff from this Arks of Omen detachment. Rob, anything you want to share with the listeners? Any thoughts you're churning through with your own list building before we get into these supposed leaks that have been dropped from the new data slate?
I think with this, it's going to be... I think we're going to see a lot of elites come from this. I think we're going to see a lot of characters. I don't think troops are going to be taken off the board.
Okay.
Troops for a lot of armies are core. And a lot of elites, especially their characters, can help with the core benefits. Now, progressing forward with this, I do think that there is going to be a lot of characters on the board. That's my only 100% outcome I can see coming from this is characters on the board consistently with each and every list. We might see some heavies, but we haven't really seen a lot of heavy support lists in the tournaments. Even now, everything has been kind of switching over to elites, with pretty much everything I have seen. I've only ever seen a few of the heavy supports, maybe a patrol detachment to bring that extra heavy in. But for me, I have seen a lot of elites, and I can only see elites and characters really progressing through and loving this sort of detachment.
Hmm. So for me, I got a couple different takes on this. So me personally, again, as a mainly orc player, I really think this is going to be a brand new time where you'll see orc players either bring all the boys or all the toys, one or the other. I can see lists that bring Gazgul plus 12 units of troops, 12 units of different configurations of boys, Gretchen, and Beast Snaga boys. And just go to town, having that many OBSEC melee threatening units on the board that are rushing at you as fast as they possibly can. And I can see consequently the opposite of that also materializing with as many available slots as you can pick, basically to have a, outrider or vanguard, option to pick from. I really can see some builds being all the toys, all the, the tanks and the battle wagons and the death rollers and, different types of, oh goodness. Oh goodness, what is it? Def Dreads. Thank you. You said dreadnoughts earlier, and I got stuck in my head. So Def Dreads.
I apologize.
And just yeah, no, you're good, man. Yeah. So either all walkers and stuff like that. So I really do think we're going to see, a lot more of those things that didn't get seen just because we didn't have the slots for them. You needed your heavy support slots for things like a battle wagon with a def roller. To kind of move your stuff around the board. You just didn't have the extra slots to really make available for those heavy things. So I do think we're going to see more.
And I could see Guard just having a field day with this.
I mean, if you wanted to drown the board in infantry squads, you could, and then you still got the option to bring, scions and Kazarkins, and you can still bring your extra characters. In that elites specific spot, you got chimeras you can bring in dedicated. I mean, it's just all the stuff.
Yes, so I definitely think the Guard is going to rise and shine come 10th. Because I could see a lot of those brand new Rough Riders with melted tips just charging in. That's what I hope for. The Guard have waited long enough. Let their time come. Let them charge.
And the sad part is that they're not really in the tournament scene yet because since the Codex hasn't been, of course, as you probably know, listeners, we've had the Cadia Stands box set. Rob and I covered that in our last episode as that dropped right around Thanksgiving. But the sad part is that because the general codex hasn't been released, they're not allowed in tournaments. That's been the rule for all the other codexes that were released in army box sets is you have to wait until it's up for general release, and we don't even have a date yet for that. And mind you, GW, classically has been doing its Christmas Battle Force boxes and now the new Marine ones. So, we weren't expecting a major shift in what got released right around Christmas and New Year's, but we don't have a date yet on when that General Guard Codex is coming. Which I hope is soon, so that all those guard generals can finally get to the good work of going out there and knocking down the Emperor's foes. On that note, I also do think this new detachment and this specific Grand Tournament pack, we're going to see a whole lot more Lords of Wars across different factions because now you can bring them with great ease. Since it's part of the mainstay detachment, you're probably going to get your faction, sept, clan, whatever, is the term for your special rules for bringing in all identical, faction army. You're going to get that, which means, you're going to be able to have your storm with Tau Sept. You're going to be able to have a Stampa with the Goff's trait for exploding, sixes in melee. You're going to be able to have that. And I think that's going to allow us to see more of these Lords of War that were shelved for a long time. Because they just weren't as efficient and they cost resources to bring. And lastly, I do think this is the detachment for greater flexibility for knights of all varieties. Obviously, the big thing now, both for Imperium and Chaos, is in their books. If you want CP refunded for a super heavy detachment, you have to bring a very specific configuration to get that refund. Now, for Chaos Knights players, the War Dog format has been one of the better formats to bring for a long time now. So it wasn't really an issue to bring just an entire army's worth of War Dogs, kind of maxing out your spots in a super heavy detachment. But this lets you just have the freedom to bring what you want. So if you're a big Forge World Knight player, bring them. Bring what you like. You're not going to be penalized for that anymore. So I'm actually very excited because I think it's going to be the most flexible list building option we've had in ninth edition for sure, and possibly even prior. Now, Robin mentioned some leaks. Other content creators, of course, got to this, first because it's what they do. It's what they do for a living, and they're a lot more responsive than Rob and I in our work can be. But we want to just briefly go over some of the leaks that are highly probable related to the upcoming data slate, as well as new balance with points in the Munitorum book that coincides with the Grand Tournament pack. So what we have, of course, one of the major leaks is the removal of Armor of Contempt. So prior to this was introduced. This allowed armies like Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, Adeptus Sororitas, and a few others to negate the first amount of AP allocated to them. And apparently that is entirely gone. What's your take on this, brother?
I'm actually sad to see it go. Even though I'm a Tau player and I got destroyed at the Summer League by Death Guard and Black Templars because I, just didn't bring enough AP for it. I'm actually sad to see it go because again, the win percentage right now for a lot of Space Marine factions is low, and the Xenos, and don't even get me started on the Chaos Demons flamethrowers, their win rate is
Yeah.
incredibly high right now. So I thought that the Armor of Contempt rule would stay. I thought it gave him that little bit of an edge. And more to the point, I kind of thought that it was very lore friendly. Again, we're talking about, pretty much walking tanks as far as the Space Marines are concerned. So I felt it was very accurate for what they are and what their stuff is made of. So I'm very sad that it didn't even really last a year. It was there and it was gone. So I'm sad to really see it go. I'm sure other players may say other things, but I thought for them it was a good move.
Your brother, for one, isn't too sad to see it go, if I'm honest, just because I do think, while it is lore friendly, and I think some of that is just kind of where we're at in an edition where things got a whole lot deadlier, and I think the power creep of the edition got away from some of the lore in that way. So maybe the fix in 10th edition is Gravis armor, much like Terminator armor starts at a 2-up armor save, but then Terminators are unique in that way, and they have an invul save compared to other Space Marines, which can be wounded and don't have ways to glance off a last cannon shot just because. So we shall see. But I do think it's going to be helpful because usually it's just as the receiving player. Again, I play Orc, so this is not pertaining to any of my factions. What's neat is that it does mean it's one less bookkeeping thing to say, okay, I'm going to shoot my AP 2 gun at this thing. Actually, now it is actually AP 1 because of Armor Contempt. Now you can go back to just doing the straight math that is available to your faction from the Codex or whatever service you happen to use. So that is supposedly gone. So a spicy little take on that if they do remove a previously awarded buff in the data slate. The next thing that has been talked about is that aircraft have to start off the table. That's a big shift from right now because, of course, what we're seeing is a specific type of Talus that uses, 1 or 2 Sunshark bombers to kind of do some strafing runs early on and really go after, globbed up units for maximum mortal wound damage. This, of course, would really lessen the alpha strike damage that can happen. And just to go first between the two of us, I do think I think this is going to be good for the game. I think losing that Alpha Strike deadliness will lead to fuller games, which I think is better for the game state than not. Because no one really loves traveling to a GT and then getting utterly buried turn one by your opponent because they're able to get the drop on your units without any interaction to the terrain and just utterly destroy you. And
Agreed.
you,
Agreed.
yeah, so I think this will. I think we'll see more strategic use of planes than we did previously, which I think is great. I think the whole point of the game is to be strategic, and not just let leverage raw, firepower against your opponent without any difficulty.
Now you know what this means also too
What's that?
is that for a lot of armies that love their deep striking, they got to add in the aircraft points too.
Yes, they do. Yes, they
So,
do.
so that's going to be a major factor. But again, I haven't seen a whole lot of armies deep striking 1,000 points in this last edition. Maybe a good 500, on an odd list. But yes, they're going to factor that in nowadays with the aircrafts being taken out. But I've only ever seen a few factions take those two aircrafts consistently. Tau being one of them. Guys, you're scaring the other factions. Just stop. Put away the Sun Sharks for at least one edition. They'll come back.
Which is funny because they came out of nowhere previously, because it's not as if the Sun Shark got a buff and that's why it became meta. It was always there from the Tau Codex release. It just wasn't brought until the meta shifted, which is kind of the last point. Of course, if we wanted to make this episode, at least an hour longer, we would go through each individual faction's supposed points adjustments. But again, that's been done ad nauseum by other content creators. Mainly, we just want to give you our take on how we think it's going to affect the battles. Rob, what do you think it's going to? How are things going to shake up with the supposed points adjustments? Some things that are obviously really good right now, getting a major hike like Tyranids, and things like Space Marines getting a really decent points drop. What do you think? How's it going to look?
Well, I'll keep it very brief. I think Space Marines are going to start coming up, winning a lot of matches coming, but again, I'm a little worried about the Arm of Contempt rule being gone. But yes, as no one's surprised, Crisis Suits have gone up in points, which is no real shock there. We've been going up in points every single balance sheet. Every single one has caused a raise. So, but yes, I think we're going to see a lot of Space Marines players come out of the woodworks because a lot of points are going down.
Yeah, and I would feel bad about your Crisis Suits if they weren't so good after each points increase that they're still on the table in mass deleting units like it's their job. So, it's sad that they've gone through multiple nerfs but are still so good. But hey, you're still able to field them. They're still an awesome unit. If you're an aspiring Tau player or just like the look, they are the unit. Anyway, back to the points thing. So my take on this is plain and simple. I think this is going to produce a new meta. Short and sweet. I do think, like all previous points adjustments, new additions, codex drops, it's going to change the what is good, and that is therefore going to shift what is good to counter the archetype of the unit or whatever is now brought in mass. I think that's a great thing. I think it's going to allow folks that have a collection in their army that they are very loyal to Tau, Orcs, Adeptus Sororitas, Tyranids, Space Marines. You're going to be able to bring the stuff that's been on the shelf collecting dust or in the case unable to be brought. You're going to be able to bring it because what was good changed, and now what's good now by comparison in this latter half of the edition will really come out and shine. And I think that's going to be some really cool stuff. As we wrap up 9th edition and get ready for 10th, let's use all the toys that we've meticulously bought, prepared, painted, and are eager to field. Bring them. We talked about it earlier when Rob was mentioning about, Razorbacks and Land Raiders. Hey, maybe this is the time we see, 6 of those, 3 Land Raiders and 3 Razorbacks making the board in earnest because they'll be able to be tough to shift, gun platforms that'll do things for their respective factions. Hey, let's see it. I think it's going to be a good time. So if we can get there, all the more power. And again, we could go on for a while, folks, and maybe we will. This is certainly not the last time we're going to be giving you some content. But you'll most likely see us in the new year as we wrap things up. So, brother, any final comments for our great listeners?
I think the only comment I would have is let's start getting creative with our list. Let's have some fun with it.
Oh, I agree. Same thing. I'm excited just to go nuts in this last and great season of Ninth Edition. I'm excited to see what else is on the other side of the board because we've been seeing kind of a not stagnant, but a very defined what is good from each army. I think this is really going to be nice to see some variety. That'll keep it exciting and interesting as a player, as a collector, and and someone that follows the lore. Um, Lastly, folks, as usual, the usual algorithm stuff. So if you enjoyed this content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. I would be happy to keep bringing you some content. Let us know by leaving us a comment down there. What did you like? What do you want us to talk about in the future? We're more than happy to do content that you like. You can find myself and Rob on Facebook and on Discord. Just check us out on the GEF Facebook page or Discord server. You can find us there. You can also just leave some info in the comments down below and we'll get you connected. So without further ado, folks, have a wonderful day.